Hi, everyone. My name is Bindu Subramaniam. I'm a singer, songwriter, music educator, entrepreneur, crazy cat lady. Emphasis on the last one because I really am a crazy cat lady.
Hi everyone, I'm Ambi Subramaniam. I'm a violinist, a composer, and an educator.
So, we come from a family of musicians. Our parents are musicians. Our grandfather was a musician. And so, growing up, music has always been a very integral part of our everyday experience. And so, for us, a life filled with music is our definition of normal. Having said that, we've always seen, and Ambi, feel free to jump in wherever, we've always seen that the power of music in making lives better, in helping children understand themselves, in, just generally bringing out joy has not always been harnessed effectively. And so many people don't have access to music in the way that they should. So for me and for Ambi, it's always been about how do we share that joy or the power of music that we've had access to as children to as many children as possible without any regard for where they come from or whether they have, parents or grandparents or cousins or anybody else in music, or whether they speak the same language or whether they come from the same circumstances. So that's kind of at the heart of everything that we do.
Yeah, and I think for us, like you're saying, the most important thing is exposure for young children, because when a lot of times when we perform and when we kind of do music, everyone says, okay, it's in the blood or it's in the genes, but we really think that's not true, because I think we've had the incredible opportunity of being exposed to amazing music and incredible artists, and we've had amazing musical training. So I think that if we're able to give that to first generation music learners, then I mean that's what a lot of what we're doing at SAPA is about. So when we do that, we see 3-year-olds coming in, some from musical backgrounds, some from non-musical backgrounds, but at age 10 you can't tell at all. But sometimes if children start learning at 10, 12, then it's very easy to tell who's from a musical background and who's not. So that's a big kind of reason we focus on young children and trying to make sure that we are able to give them, like she was saying, the kind of exposure and access that we had.
And I think when, we started doing this, when SAPA was started in 2007, and then when the SAPA in Schools program was started in 2014, the question that people used to ask us was, can kids, especially young children, really appreciate classical music? And I think in some sense that's been our big fight, for want of a better word, because we come from a system that is very respectful of classical music, respectful of traditions, and we see the joy in it. We see how young children can love and engage with classical music, and there's never been anything difficult about getting small children to love music. The music is great. It's the methodology that had to change. And if the methodology had to change, it doesn't mean the music has to change. It means the educators have to change. So as music educators, we start with the premise that if a child is not understanding or appreciating classical music, the teacher needs to change. The music doesn't need to change and the child doesn't need to change. So how can we do better? How can we present better? How can we engage better with children? And thankfully, over the last decade plus that we've worked on it, this is no longer a question that we get as much, because we have parents who come to us with children who are 1.5 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old, saying, my child really loves music and I want him or her to have a foundational understanding in Indian classical music. So a lot of the innovation we do starts with that. So how do we give them a foundational understanding or an appreciation for traditional music, and then from there you can build on it and understand and appreciate any other style of music as well.
A lot of times we do workshops as well, in schools where we have, say, 200 3-year-olds who are sitting, and a lot of times we kind of work on sending, say, classical instruments that are not very common, that are not very well known. But again, I think, like she was saying, when we're able to kind of change the methodology and make it accessible in a way that a 3 or 4-year-old can kind of really appreciate it, then you see that these kind of this very traditional classical music is totally enjoyed and loved by 3 4-year-olds.
So I think coming from a family of musicians has been something that initially, when we were younger, felt like a lot of pressure, and that okay, this is the benchmark that we have to aspire to. But honestly, I feel so grateful to see the kind of love that people have for music, and we've benefited greatly from being surrounded by that love. It's set an impossibly high standard, to be very honest. I mean, it's always that, whether you're 10 years old or 12 years old, you're compared to your parents at their peak, and that's hard. But the moment you realize that you and your art are not the same thing, and that people are very passionate about music, and people love the music, and they want to support the artist, that's when you can start saying, okay, we come from this place of privilege, and we acknowledge that, and we respect it, and we want to use this position that we have to share music with as many people as possible. Because if we are third generation musicians who are telling you that it doesn't matter whether you come from a musical family or not, and here are 40,000 kids or 50,000 kids that we've worked with who don't come from musical families and still are very powerful musicians, or are able to emote effectively through music, or are able to discover the magic of what lies in music, I think that's a great way for us to be able to use that privilege. And as people, I think, we come from a family that's not only musicians but educated. Like, our father's a medical doctor. He got his PhD. He got a master's in orchestral composition. When he was growing up, if you were a classical musician, you did only Indian classical music. You wouldn't even listen to other styles. But his parents were so open-minded that they said, you should go abroad. You should study Western classical violin. You should study orchestral compositions. And he got his scholarships, and he did that. So we've kind of come from a place where, yes, there is this tradition of music, and it is very intense and it is very serious, but the world is a big place. And I think that's something that we've benefited from, and that's something that we try to give our students as well, that you don't have to be just one thing. Like, you can work very hard and be the best at your art, but at the same time have other things that drive you, other things that you work towards. And we see that so beautifully in some of our students who are pursuing, say, they could be playing the violin, they could be singing, they could be doing art, they could be doing composition. And really, I think our generation and the generations that are coming after us are generations where you can really build your own, set of superpowers, for want of a better word.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, the world is very open right now. So there are a lot of things that interest different people. So I think at the end of it, you find things that interest you, and at some point, you will find a way to bring all of them together. So I think in our case as well, I mean, if you're looking at pure musicality, then we've always been interested in a lot of different things. And at the time of learning, maybe it wasn't clear, okay, how is this going to go with this? Or is it conflicting? Or then at different points, you decide that, okay, fine, this is going to come together this way, or it's not going to come together, and that's okay. But in that way, I think you're kind of creating your own unique voice. And as well, I mean, for everyone, for us as musicians as well, like, music is obviously a huge part of our lives, and most of the day goes in doing something music related. But as people, I think we both believe that we're not only music,
Yeah.
and there are other things also. Like everybody's interested in multiple things, everybody's inspired by multiple things. So um, I think just because you're a musician doesn't mean that you should cut out everything else in your life.
That's why you tried learning how to make white rice.
Correct. Fried rice also.
Fried rice also. I'll give you that. So, both of us have been on stage since we were quite young, doing solo work, working with our parents in different capacities. And so, at some point, I think it was 2013, where we decided, let's do something fun together, where we can just kind of make it a safe space to experiment with all the exciting musical things that we want to do.
Yeah, I think prior to that, what used to happen would be like I would try to fit into one of her compositions, or she would try to fit into one of my compositions. So it was never like a collaboration where we were equally comfortable or equally in kind of uh, a space where we would think we could contribute well.
And I think from the whole idea of calling it Subramania is sort of an inside family joke, where when our father was traveling in Russia in the 1980s, they had these huge posters with his name in Cyrillic, and somehow Subramaniam became Supermaniac. And so we found that extremely hilarious as children. So this Supermaniac. And so when we needed a name for our band, it just kind of made sense to call it Subramania. So that's kind of tipping our hat to where we come from, but also the fact that we're playful and we don't take ourselves too seriously. And we wanted to find a space that could catch all the things that were interesting, whether it was a Latin rhythm or, an African lullaby or some complex Carnatic raga or a pop song. And so we decided that Subramania would sort of be contemporary world music. And it was a lot of fun, and it has been a lot of fun for us because we get to create our own songs, we get to work with different musicians, and we don't have a defining boundary of, this is not Subramania. It's largely been acoustic, but it's been a sound that has evolved, and that's a place of really great joy and fun for both of us.
Yeah, and I think so for us, why we kind of have two bands is because I think Subramania is more on the world music side, where we work with more acoustic instruments and take kind of inspiration from different parts of the world. Taishadam project was more like Carnatic and electronic music kind of brought together. So for us, the sounds are very distinct. And so I think apart from that, we've been lucky to kind of meet some amazing people, collaborate with some amazing musicians. So I think for us, it's always kind of cool to learn and be inspired by different people that we meet. So I think that's a big reason why we do music and we do art. So we kind of we grow as people and grow as musicians by doing a lot of these collaborations. Well, I think it's difficult to find that kind of line in the sand because there's a lot of mixing of everything that happens. So obviously, we do spend a lot of time working by ourselves, trying to improve every day. But a lot of times when we end up teaching, it's a huge learning for us as well. And what's really interesting is sometimes when you work with different students, they all need to be taught differently, and a lot of times the way we try to teach is we're more like mentors than teachers. So a lot of times when I'm sitting with the same composition five different students, they will bring in 5 different flavors. So one student will say, okay, can we try it this way? I'd like to add, because I think with Indian music, a lot of it is improvisational. There's a lot of kind of creativity that you are expected to bring in. So it's nice to see when the people that we work with also are bringing in their creativity. So I get to see 5 different versions of the same piece. And now a lot of musicians that we work with now, these young artists are also very good composers. So we have like these 14-15-year-old kids who are fantastic composers, and they make their own music. So I think it's very exciting for us also to kind of to see what they're coming up with, and try to bring our 2 cents in, but also we end up learning a lot through that. So to maybe answer your question, in that sense, we don't necessarily have like a strict okay, I spend 2 hours a day on this, I spend 4 hours a day on this, I spend 6 hours a day on this. It depends on the projects that are there. It depends on our travel. Sometimes if you're on tour, then that schedule is very different. But for us, I think we just try to spend our entire day on music, and some days that means more of one and less of the other.
I think musical traditions in India are very rich, right? And if you go back as far as the Vedas and you look at the origins of music, there has always been strong classical musical traditions. There have been strong spiritual practice associated with music. There's also been very strong temporal folk kind of, music as an important part of life. So on the backdrop of that, music has evolved to become such a critical part of life in India, right? And like the joke is, everyone has a soundtrack to their life, whether it's the sound of the auto rickshaw driver, or the vegetable vendor, or the temple bell that rings in the morning. And I think the beautiful thing about a country like India is that we're all by default used to diversity and accepting of it, right? So it's very normal to sit next to someone on the bus and they're speaking a totally different language from you. So if that's the conditioning that we have, then we are much more open to say, okay, these are different musical traditions and all of this is fine. And I think the great thing that's been happening over the past few decades is we've been open-minded enough to kind of look at different traditions and see how they can grow together. We're not saying that, okay, this is mine and that is yours and that shouldn't meet. And I'm saying, yes, this has happened over the last few decades, but if you look at classical music traditionally, it's gone back a few hundred years. Like on our Sapa t-shirts, as a joke, but also a point, we put Muthuswami Dikshita and said the original fusion musician, because even in his time, he was looking at bringing in different influences and creating. So music has always been something that's evolving. It's always been something that's fresh. So even if you look at classical music in the time of Dikshita was different than classical music in the time of Purandaradasa is different than the classical music in the time of Chemangudi. But we kind of say that all of this is classical music. And so we need to be accepting of the fact that it is evolving and it is growing and it is important. And there is also a wealth of music that doesn't fall into these buckets, that is more contemporary, that is electronic, that is world music, that is intersectionalities of music and art, that is experimental, that is spoken word, that is rap, that is reggae, that is all of these things. And I think the future is where people become exposed to so many different things that they're not even so worried about the genre anymore. I don't think that's even relevant, because when you look at Spotify now, you've got your daily playlist and his will have everything from Eminem to Chemangudi. And I think that's okay. And that's actually pretty exciting, because then what you create out of that is something that is neither but equally exciting.
Yeah, I know. And I think also to your point, when we talk about classical music, sometimes the most traditional ragas that we're talking about, many of them have emerged from tribal and folk music. So a lot of this has always happened, but probably now it's happening at a much faster, accelerated pace. And like she was saying, one thing that personally I'm very happy about is what I see with our generation as well. Like when we are kind of looking at doing things with different artists, and we're doing kind of collaborations, there is a focus now. I think people like my dad started that, but there is a focus to learn and understand the other art form as well. So say if we are collaborating with a flamenco musician tomorrow, it's important that we know a little bit about their music and they know a little bit about our music. So it's not just, okay, fine, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll meet at the end. So I think this understanding and learning these other art forms makes collaborations a little more meaningful, makes music that could potentially last as pieces of art a little longer, because they're more thought out, they're more kind of complete musical pieces. So I think in that sense it's really nice to see that these collaborations are happening where people are willing to kind of listen and learn and understand other art forms. So yes, you love your style of music the most, which is why you're doing that.
That's why you're doing it, yeah.
But that doesn't mean any other style is less complex or less important or less beautiful. So I think that's really nice to see that a lot of people are kind of doing that now. We've done a couple of background scores for like different languages and things like that. Recently we did a background score for a Sinhala movie, and last year I was a part of the Sardar Udham movie that recently won a bunch of national awards as well. So I really enjoy doing that. I think both of us do, as one of the things that we do. So that's not my primary focus at this time. I do enjoy doing that a lot, but I also enjoy performing. I also enjoy teaching. So I don't think I would be happy doing that 24/7. But as one of the things, I find it very enjoyable.
And I think one exciting thing about the whole landscape of film music is that it isn't one style of music. So it is very diverse. It is very exciting. There's so many different things happening. And now with most consumption happening on OTT platforms, the kind of music that's coming out, the kind of genres that are being represented, the kind of storytelling that's happening through music is becoming more and more exciting. So it's definitely something that is fun to do. And there are some people who do it full time and some people who are excited about just kind of being a part of that universe once in a while. And I think we kind of fall into the second bucket.